Eric maybe give us an update, unless you wanted to say a few
Yes,
words
ma'am.
after that.
Absolutely.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Well, I'm Robert Simon. I'm the regional administrator for FEMA Region 4, which is the 8 southeastern states.
Eric Gibson, Emergency Management here for Kentucky.
Thanks for the great.
Yes, ma'am. Hope you enjoyed.
Hi, good evening. Jeremy Slinker. I'm the Federal Coordinating Officer for FEMA here on this event.
I'm your AA for Office of Disaster Recovery.
I'm the current acting FEMA administrator. We're working with the great governor and now our awesome secretary. So, honored to meet you.
Good. Well, Eric, you want to take over and
Yes,
give us
ma'am.
a little bit of a briefing, and maybe
Absolutely.
Jeremy can fill in too.
I think I would be more than happy to give an explanation of just a few of the things that have been going on around the Commonwealth. As you got to just go out across and just get just a snapshot of one of the communities.
I see we've got some pictures up
Yes,
here
ma'am.
too.
We've kind of loaded up some things that just kind of give some reference to some of the things we were seeing and how the declarations unfolded. Kentucky's a really, the topography of our state is very diverse, from the flat out in the western part to the rolling hills here in the middle that you got to see. And then you got to taste a little bit of that eastern Kentucky mountain area there, that Appalachian region. The flooding came in on the night of the morning of the 15th, technically. And as it started raining, it started out in that western Kentucky area, kind of come up through that central western part. And we started seeing 6-inch totals of rain over this entire event. But we started to have some flash flooding in the very beginning. We started seeing fatalities early on the 15th in Hart County, one of the counties kind of right out in the central area of the state. And then as the rain started moving east, and it took a few hours before it got over to eastern Kentucky. When it got over to the eastern Kentucky area, it really kind of set in on them and rained for days. And it rained all throughout Saturday, rained into Sunday, and then ended with a snow event, about 6 inches of snow across that part of the state. So that left all the people that were displaced through all the work that the rescuers done, pulling people from those homes, and people that were evacuated in their own way, many of them without power, without shelter. So we had some really cold temperatures that set in on the backside, dropped that temperature down, wind chills around 0 for several days in a row. So we really had a multi-tiered response. We started out with a rain event that created well over 1,000 rescues, many of them by air, many of them by our urban search and rescue teams. And that's where I want to just compliment the team from FEMA and the Kentucky Emergency Management, along with all the other urban search and rescue, and then search and rescue all the way down to the local level. Our urban search and rescue coordinator, Doug Hargraves, is back behind me here, and he runs our Task Force 1. And he's here to he's put some of the pictures up that you see, and those are just locations along the river that they've done rescues. Every dot indicates where our team recorded that they went in and actually visited those homes and cleared to make sure there was nobody trapped or needing evacuated in those homes.
You were doing those by boat?
Most of those were by boat, yes, ma'am.
What kind of boats were you using?
Just a Zodiac,
Okay.
14-foot Zodiac. A lot of rescues, they truly did save a lot of lives that night.
So how much notice did these families have?
We knew the storm was coming in, and but they were dealt with the 2022 flood.
Right.
And so they kind of knew, but again, it's just the rain came so much.
Yeah.
And then in that area, the search and rescue teams in that area, they're not that many because of this wide area. But we had 33 teams in the state that, as the urban search and rescue team develops, we rely on the local teams.
Right.
So we kind of contacted 33 teams, and this office deployed 25 teams.
I see. Wow.
So we kind of coordinated well in advance and pre-positioned across the state, the map that you're looking at. We had teams put, because we didn't know where we would be the hardest impacted.
Right.
So we used our resources, spread them out across the state, and then we, waited for the rain to come to where the calls started coming. As the event shifted to be that eastern Kentucky tragedy that we're seeing, we started moving those teams east. We started moving them from our western Kentucky areas that we were not impacted over into that eastern Kentucky area where they became very, very busy. But the compliment I would like to say, and I'm not sure it always gets back, but during the night, Saturday, we had been working through the day Saturday, and we started to see these calls starting to escalate. And when we were seeing that call volume escalate, we knew that we were going to need additional first responders to come in and help us. And we made the call for task force to come in from FEMA. And when we made that request, Indiana was the first in. They were in this EOC by 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning. They were standing here among us saying, where do you need us at? What do we need to do? by the time they arrived, the emergency declaration had been signed, and we were ready to go to work. And that says so much about how much your administration and the leadership from the local team here, because FCO Slinker came from North Carolina and was here before daylight, and followed right in very shortly by Regional Administrator Simon. So their response coming in, providing me that support, and us knowing we followed up the Indiana team with the Ohio team and then the Missouri team. So we pushed in 3 additional federal teams to kind of match that state effort that we were putting out, and we found that everybody here was very busy. North Carolina sent us 2 state teams, and then Indiana conservation officers also deployed several teams. So we brought in, and we kept, all those responders were very busy for many, many days. Even after the initial flood came, we still found that many people were isolated beyond passable roads. In other words, they weren't necessarily drowning in their homes, but they couldn't get out. They needed immediate aid. They were out of power, and this cold weather had set in on them. Our power outages spiked a little over 40,000 in this event. So that means, you figure there's 3 people per home, 4 people per home. So we have a lot of Kentuckians that were starting to suffer in that cold weather event. So we started transitioning from the rescue, then into the commodities, the relief supplies, the blankets, the food, the water, the necessary supplies. The event unfolded for several days, but the response from your staff, I can only say good things, so many good things about. Help came very fast, came swift, and it was the appropriate response for the disaster that the Commonwealth was dealing with. We had inbound of commodities come straight in from to our distribution center, where we run underneath that urban search and rescue. We had a warehouse available, 22,000 square feet. We started taking commodities immediately. We've shipped out over right at about 2 million bottles of water. I'd hate to be exactly on the number, but about that many truckloads of water have gone out across the Commonwealth, with about 2 million bottles being delivered and available for because we had so many hospitals that were offline, and so many of our, the nursing homes and all that were out of water and power. So, and then the next thing, when the cold came, we ordered a load of blankets, and they came in literally straight from the Atlanta area. They went straight into the impacted zone. We got them into our shipping center and distributed them out across the Commonwealth. So quick resources, very quick work, and was a very good partner to walk alongside the state as we did our part to take care of our mission. Emergency Operations Center has been continually in operation now for since the event began on Saturday. We've kept it staffed and taken probably about 470 to 500 resource requests over the past 24 hours. I haven't looked at today's totals. We're seeing those counties are begging for that help now. Hey, we need you to bring some supplies in. We need to bring in, and we saw that need come escalated, and then so we answered that immediate response. We lost 23 Kentuckians in this event, tragically, some of them very tragically, honestly. High water event, hypothermia, both. So we had 2 different things that were taking people's lives. That event, then we transitioned into a little more stable environment where we started doing some damage assessments, and we could quickly see that the damage was widespread across these. The first 10 impacted areas were some that you saw today, and we immediately wrote that request for emergency declaration or expedited declaration that thank you for signing, because that allowed us to turn on and start offering that individual assistance to those people, and to also the public assistance to those communities. Basically, their county governments have been overwhelmed by disaster after disaster, and being able to turn on that, at least the idea that there's a relief coming. When we visited yesterday with Administrator Hamilton, very easy to see that people were hopeful of the future, but they were currently in a time of hurt, and you could see that tragedy had affected them personally. We visited so many times. Mr. Hamilton, do you have?
Yeah, it was very sobering. Definitely, they were grateful for the speed and the swiftness of the response there. It's going to take a while to recover in a lot of these areas. Very hard hit, very rural, very poor socioeconomic communities that are devastatingly impacted, especially on the business side. So I'm glad you're here, ma'am, to see some of the and to talk with some of our staff about the specific impacts there. I will say, from our perspective, Robert and Jeremy both drove literally through the night to get here. Robert made the call, early staging of resources. That was part of the aggression, the forward leaning. When I briefed you on what was happening, I know your first response was everything that they need, make sure it's provided. So Robert and Jeremy both, did yeoman's work of making sure that was executed very quickly. so that, again, we could help support. I think they had 1,500 roughly from the state, and then we had another 500 rescues from our urban search and rescue team, so a good plus up. Definitely, was helpful given the scheme of maneuvers. And then from there, we were delivering, I think, 125,000 meals, 1 million liters of water, almost 5,000 blankets. We delivered hundreds and hundreds of cots, but mostly now we're in the supporting role to help ensure that the state has everything that they need. And then we're going to be talking, we've already got survey teams out looking at some of the damage. You've seen that before in other areas, all the debris, for not just a health and safety perspective, but also from an economic vitality perspective. People aren't going to shop, people are going to spend money, businesses aren't going to be able to open with all that debris and all that rubble there. And then also just the mud. So it's really been an incredible response, and we're standing by, and we're grateful to help the state of Kentucky in any way we can. So thank you for your
What
leadership,
do we
man.
have for infrastructure damage as far as roads and bridges and
Yes.
water plants down, and so what's the?
Right, at the height of the event, we were over 200 roads across the Commonwealth were completely closed due to landslides, mudslides. You saw the terrain. Those hills slip down into the roads become blocked. Very difficult to get that traffic moving, takes heavy equipment. Also, many roads inundated with water, and we had several roads that just washed away, during the time. So we're going to have a lot of repairs. Many bridges out across the Commonwealth. We estimate that there are, on state roads, probably about 20 of our state road bridges have been damaged or need repair. And then we also have many, many county roads, and the counties are starting to report that in as we become to that stabilization phase where we can actually do a better job
Right.
of seeing the total impact as we're trying to reach out and contact those
Do you
counties.
have anybody still out of power?
Yes, the power totals right now are 182, so
Okay.
nothing to speak of.
Yeah.
Our
Except for
power
those
companies,
182.
yeah, those 182 might not agree with me, right?
Right.
We
That's
always,
good progress,
Down
though.
from several thousand.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Yeah.
that's good progress.
yeah, that'll peak it peaked at 40,000 during the event, and we saw that just kept going, up and up. Critical infrastructure needs, our wastewater systems, our drinking water systems, several of them were inundated in the flow of the water. Shorted out their circuit boards on their electrical power to the pumps and things of that nature. Contractors are working very hard to get that up. I think at my last check, which hasn't been for a few hours, about 2,300 Kentuckians remain without drinking water or power of water. And then we still had several systems that were in bypass on as they try to get those pump stations running again. But really the critical infrastructure, bridges and roads, but the thing that's coming to my top of my page with all of my judges and judge executives across the Commonwealth are the debris. And it's really
So what
almost.
do you do with that? Do you have contractors under contract now to start removing it to local landfills and?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
That we have a debris contractor that we have a master agreement with. They've been deployed to North Carolina,
Yep.
working down there, getting, working and into Florida. It's once the declaration, we're working through this piece of getting the assessments so that we
Right.
can get that category A added to there but there had to be an assessment to determine
Yeah,
if we
there
had
does
the
have to-
debris.
that was one of the things, is that it's, some states can turn in their declarations and their requests, but they have to have some data in them in
Yes,
order
ma'am.
for us to respond. So we appreciate
Absolutely.
when people do fill those out appropriately, so we can take action on them. Because when they're just sent in immediately, it's nice to say you got it submitted, but it's not helpful if you don't have it submitted. And we're always willing to help do that
Yeah.
correctly, so we can get it going.
Yes, ma'am. And Robert sent some assessment teams, Robert and
Good.
Jeremy both sent
help
people in the
us
field
yeah.
to speed that process up.
Good.
Yep. Yes, sir. And, yes, ma'am, that's what I was going to add. We've mission assigned, FEMA's mission assigned the Corps of Engineers to do a debris
good.
assessment.
Yeah.
And so instead of waiting for the whole impacted area to be completed, as they get county or two counties done, we're immediately notifying the state, what those assessments say. And his assistant director is already working on declarations for Category A debris removal.
Right.
Good deal.
We get the documentation, you're getting the paperwork right into you just as quickly as we can get it through region, through the administrator, and, into the right hands. And we want to add those resources because we know that that's the one thing that everybody wants to return to that economic, part of their community to get back to work. And right now they're looking at a mess, and that's heartbreaking for them to continually see the same thing. So we'll have those damage assessments in very, very quickly. We're getting our debris assessments in. We started the debris task force as soon as we come out of the response phase. The first time we join in this room with our counties, we do a call in here with all the counties that have impacted are asked to attend. and we started talking about this debris task force. And that was one of the very first things we did. We got the Corps of Engineers. We used our subject matter expert that we put on staff that came in to help us. And then we put those teams out doing those assessments. So we can provide you the information you need to make accurate decisions.
Yep. And then you have a different contract, I'm guessing, for removing of automobiles and someone, because that's a totally different kind
Yeah.
of debris removal.
They are actually part of the contract. They have to do the white goods and all the debris.
Right.
Now, the waterway stuff gets to be a little bit different. National Conservation Resource Services provides some assistance with waterway debris and waterway debris removal. And so we've tasked that over to them to assist us with the waterway debris. And I think FCO Slinker has notified them that we're going to be, as we move forward into this event, that we have to have some assistance with some waterway removal.
The advantage we
Yes.
have here versus what we find in California, you had so many solar panels and so many lithium-ion battery cells. The mitigation for that was actually quite complicated, so the EPA had to have a whole new profile to render safe, basically batteries that are essentially, it's like a minefield. Fortunately, we don't have that here, so the debris removal, I think, will be able to
Right.
work a little bit faster, but that's
Right.
part of the reason why it's taken so long in California.
Right.
It's because we have to ensure that the scene is safe for people to re-enter their homes. And so they're developing some plans of action, and once that
Mhm.
declaration comes in, if we approve, again, some of the debris removal, then we can adjunct and add on counties as it goes and as the assessments continue. That part can be done very quickly. So,
Well, Administrator, would you like to say a few words or have Chris give a few words too?
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Secretary Noem. It's a great honor to be here with you and to, my condolences go out to the families that lost loved ones.
Mhm.
And I know you and I just walked out of a cabinet meeting today with President Trump and came straight here, and you can, hopefully everyone can see we have the support of the entire Trump administration behind this effort, and really grateful to President Trump for issuing that disaster order with less than 48 hours after these tragic events. And thank you for the great tour, Eric. Thanks for working with Chris, who I brought in from the
Right.
state of Georgia, who is our Associate Administrator of Disaster. Tomorrow in Perry County, we will open our first Business Recovery
Yes,
Center,
ma'am.
Excellent.
which is great news. We have 16 people on the ground. There's more to come. This is my, by the way, 6th day on the job.
I know.
So it's really,
That's
this is such an important part of our work at
It is.
SBA, which is following FEMA, where you've done tremendous work on triage. I just want to commend you and your team because the work here has been swift. And the coordination, I think this is an example of how we can start to break down silos and barriers and working together to restore the community. And I look forward to the SBA being, here for the long haul through small business lending, both economic injury disaster loans, so loss of business revenue and activity, and also the physical disaster loans, and finally the residential, the homeowner and renters disaster loans. So please visit SBA.gov to make sure that you're getting information. That process is underway. We've already processed dozens and dozens of applications. So thank you again.
No, that's fantastic. Chris?
I would just add that Administrator Leffler, she hit the nail on the head. We're here to support. We understand our role in this. There's two parts of recovery, the short term and the long term. We understand that our role is in the long-term recovery and supporting businesses, homeowners, renters. That is key for us. Understanding the fact that these folks are hurting, so they're going to come to us with a set of problems, maybe losing their home or the ability to provide the documentation. So it's important for us to get in these disaster recovery centers and business recovery centers and work hand in hand with the disaster survivor, ensuring that recovery. As the administrator mentioned, we've already begun processing applications, which is two-part. That's understanding that Kentucky does remember 2 years ago they suffered a significant event, but we were there for them then, and they knew they could come to us quickly. So we're proud to know that we're already working with that. As the administrator mentioned, we've got folks on the ground. We've already canvassed 80 businesses as of this afternoon and helped them begin the process of this is what it's going to look like moving forward, and that will only grow throughout the area. We're working throughout, obviously, the disaster area and all the contiguous counties that are associated with that, so we'll be in there as well, as the administrator mentioned. Business, physical disasters, the economic injury, of course, the homeowners. And we've made it very, very usable. As she mentioned, the website is very easy to go to, collect the data. It walks you through question by question. You can work it from a cell phone, an iPad. But we also have folks there in these disaster recovery centers that'll be walking out, showing a disaster survivor how to walk through that process so we can make it quick and painless as we can. We have a very important role in this, which is to assist that survivor in making, probably the most uncomfortable thing they've ever experienced in their life as comfortable as we can make it. And so we appreciate the administrator's leadership. She was quick to turn on resources. As soon as we could get in without interfering with recovery efforts and life-saving mission, we were there because to these small businesses, we are life-saving mission as well. And so we understand that role and we take it very seriously.
They've been remarkable. They've had a very aggressive posture. I've seen them at work in California and in North Carolina, and they've really done some incredible work at the SBA. So, ma'am, kudos to your leadership. Whatever was there before, it's been just turned on the afterburners. It's been moving fast, and I think the declaration came down, and within 18 hours, we had the first DRC open, and they've been there ready to go and ready to deliver aid and support. So it's definitely essential, and thank y'all for being here.
Thank you.
Program that the Commonwealth launched out we basically did a state-led disaster recovery center to kind of supplement until the FEMA centers spun.
Yep.
And Administrator Hamilton and I got a chance to visit one yesterday.
Oh,
When we
good.
walked in, there were people there
Yeah.
taking advantage of these early, and they're co-located, right? It's our facility working hand in hand with your folks, and we filled up the room with people ready to help.
Right.
And we walked in, these disaster recovery centers are there for our people, to get that immediate aid. Our governor's really a forward-leaning posture on emergency management. He supports the efforts that we do, and I know he's worked very closely with you all.
Yep.
And I can't say enough about how the relationship is so important to be successful in one of these disasters. Good information quickly from me to him and from him to you is critical in making sure that Kentucky is as protected as it possibly can be during one of these disasters. So many thanks from me personally and all the friends that I have across the state, but as a whole, the state of the Commonwealth of Kentucky is very grateful for the work that you all have put in and will be continuing to do, but just taking time from the schedule that all three of you on the other side of the table have immensely busy schedules. We understand that. You all have spent time on our state, and it's truly a bright side of what's going on to see this disaster and see the people that can make decisions to affect how aid is received by our people from the appropriate staff. And truly, your presence is very much speaks volumes for the work that we believe is in front of us.
Well, thank you. Anybody else have anything we forgot or should know? Otherwise, we'll open it up to the press to ask some questions if they'd like to, if everybody at the table is okay with that.
Sure.
Yes, ma'am.
Could you give an overview of what you witnessed today?
We had the opportunity to do, I don't know, maybe it's an hour and a half, 2 hours in the air, flying over the flooded area in the Kentucky River and seeing some of the homes that were destroyed and flooded, some of the areas, the hospital that was so jeopardized by floodwaters that were very close to coming over the wall, but also seeing many of the businesses as low as we could get. We did not have a chance to get on the ground because the trip is so quick. We've got, as you know, several other states that were impacted by this disaster as well. So we're dealing with other states as well and the time frame here, but knowing that the team was on the ground and even when the event started, the governor and I were in conversation and talking on the phone quite often. And I think that's been one of the benefits of moving quickly is, I was a governor before, and governors run disaster responses. I did 12 FEMA-related disasters in the 6 years that I was governor in South Dakota, and so I understand all the programs and the response and how it happens and the best response. And typically in every state, it is a locally led disaster response that's supported by the state. And FEMA comes in and then builds more resources behind that and fills in the gaps that's necessary, and that's what exactly happened here. So, but if we do that well, it's helpful when leaders know each other and can pick up the phone and call, and every governor in this country has my personal cell phone number, and most of the time that gets passed on to their emergency management directors too, which I think helps us make sure that people get a better response and better communication as well. So we did not get the chance to visit with a lot of the families and families that lost loved ones. And for me, that's what happens. There's events that happens in people's lives where they something changes it forever. And they're forever now their lives will be, well, that was before we lost that loved one, or that was after, or this is when that was before we lost our home, or this was after the flood of 2025. And that's what this event was for so many Kentuckians. And our prayers have been with the Commonwealth, but also know that we, our heart and our hands are here as well to help take care of them. So we'll continue to stand alongside of you and do all we can to be that response. And my message from President Trump today is he knew we were coming here, and he wanted all of you to know that he's ready to help and respond and support, and is thinking of everybody here, and that him and Melania wish everyone well, and I'm supposed to go home and report what you need, and he's grateful for all of the folks that are here leading the efforts. But I also had the chance to visit with some of your congressmen. Andy Barr visited with him. I know his district is part of the flooded area and hurt area, so visited with him about some of the impacts as well. Also with Hal Rogers, who's been a family friend of mine for years, and visited with him about his district was devastated as well, and got the kind of insight. I appreciate them and their staff focusing on this as well, and knowing that when it comes to this kind of a response, that we have to have the support of Congress and their leadership and insight, and their staff have been available to us as well. So the 10 counties that were impacted and the communities will continue to walk this path towards restoration, but we'll do what we can to help them and make sure that the resources are there that are necessary. The previous FEMA administrator, when she came under the last administration, came to South Dakota this last year, we had a 1,000-year flood that devastated our state, and 26 counties were declared federal disaster areas. But she did say something that I think is important that we need to do at the federal level, is a lot of education before events happen. Educating the public on what we can do to be better prepared for these type of disasters. But a lot of what we can do is put out a blueprint for how we communicate between the local responders, with the state responders, with the federal responders. So FEMA will be coming out with some streamlined communication and response so that we're all on the same page all the time. But you've seen some of that at work already. And also she gave some advice that talked about, if it rains where your house is, you need flood insurance. The families, the risk that they need for this kind of an event needs to be covered, because they could lose everything. But also our flood insurance program is broken, and we need to fix it, because right now it's so unaffordable for so many people. So I know that there was a lot of loss in areas that are not flood zones, but part of what I'll be carrying forward to a lot of Americans is it's always wise to get covered with insurance where you can, to cover with flood insurance, and we need to reform that program so that is possible and is affordable for everybody going forward. Yes, sir.
I have a quick policy question.
Yes.
Do you think that there should be a higher threshold that states have to meet in order to get FEMA help, essentially meaning that the states would be responsible for more of their disaster response?
No, I don't necessarily think that's the answer. We've talked about giving the states more opportunity just to get funds and to decide how those funds get best utilized to serve their people. I mean, that's really President Trump's vision. You've heard him talk about eliminating FEMA. And what he means by that is that the people that are closest to the individuals that were hurt or impacted by a disaster are the ones who know what they need more than people sitting in Washington, D.C. do. So the ability for us to, grant dollars to the state or to the local authorities so that they can decide how those monies and those resources get deployed is important. And that's some of the ideas that Cameron's bringing to me, that we're putting together on how we can reform FEMA so it's less paperwork, less applications, less waiting around to see if you're going to get any help, that you just know help will be there. This is what it is, that you go talk to somebody who actually lives in your community to see if you're going to get the response, and you don't have to sit around waiting weeks and weeks for bureaucrats in Washington, D.C., thousands of miles to answer the phone or to give you an answer to a claim that you may have filed. So there's people I've talked to in this country that filed claims 7, 8 years ago that were valid claims that should have been paid that are still waiting around for checks. And that's just wrong. That's just wrong, and the federal government is such a disappointment in so many ways. It doesn't have to be that way, and we're determined to fix FEMA so that doesn't happen anymore. What else? Yes, sir.
You just mentioned it right there, but I also want to ask, these potential cuts that are coming to FEMA, could that impact the response time in any future scenario?
I don't think there's necessarily cuts. I think that it's going to be reforms that'll make sure that dollars still get deployed to the disasters. If you saw a reduction in spending, it's probably going to be in, less people needed at the administrative level, or, less buildings in Washington DC, and more of those dollars being able to be deployed down to the local level. So I think, everywhere I have gone in the short time I've been in this job, overwhelmingly what I hear from victims is just make it easier. Just make it easier. So many times people have to go in and get help just to fill out their applications. And there's so many nonprofits that are out there that could be serving families that have loss. Instead, they're trying to help somebody fill out a FEMA application. And it just doesn't have to be that hard. So I don't think there's any agreement that should be cuts. I think there's agreement that this needs to be a smaller agency with less bureaucracy so that people get more help.
I have a point on that
Yes.
too, if you don't mind, ma'am. So we're overhauling the method in which we communicate with survivors. There's a new information environment that we're going to be launching in the coming months, which will make us faster, make applications easier to process. You won't be getting the same denial letters. You'll be getting actual real-time feedback and information on how to amend your applications so that survivors are aware what resources can be made available, and they can be pushed towards decisions faster so they can get that assistance in hours or days as opposed to weeks, months, and unfortunately at times even longer. So we're leaning in very aggressively under President Trump and Secretary Noem's leadership on really making sure that we're a public agency. I work for you all, the American taxpayer, and we have to be responsive and we have to be quicker. And those are things that we're doing and implementing now so that we can ensure that in the future, we're going to be one step ahead and we're going to be continually improving.
What else? Yep.
Nobody else.
Go ahead.
Can you shed some light on what your plans are to improve FEMA's flood insurance program?
Well, that's something that Congress is going to have to help us with. That takes congressional action for them to help us really look at that program and see what we can do to reform it so that it is more affordable for folks. Because right now, even if they are in a flood zone or flood area, floodplain, if their mortgage company didn't require it, they just don't buy it because it's not affordable. And I tell everybody, I think that flood insurance is a smart investment. We're seeing events around the country where people are being impacted that aren't in flood areas. But the reality is economics plays a role, and it's got to be something that they can afford to go out. If they're making a choice between whether to put food on the table for their kids or buy flood insurance, I guarantee you their kids are coming first. Yes.
You talked at the roundtable about information that you received quickly. What did Kentuckians on the ground, Beshear's administration, emergency management, the people affected, what did we do correctly to get things moving as quickly as possible?
Well, I think the outreach, obviously, from the state to us immediately was very helpful. And as soon as I was hearing of the rain event before it was even starting, I called your governor and asked what he needed, and we went back and forth too. So I think it kind of the responsibility goes a little bit both ways. But the fact that a state has a public emergency management program is critically important. Every state is different. And so some states may be totally independent and not need FEMA to come in at all until it comes to actually paying claims for people. But their first response, they have their own swift water rescue teams. They have their own people that they can deploy out to respond to the community and get them out of dangerous situations and get them into shelters and nonprofits that get deployed. Other states are not in that situation at all. They just don't have those resources. So we're going to be working to get every state prepared for what they should be able to provide for themselves. But always that notification and that response has to be run locally. That local government, that local county through an emergency management responder that coordinates with the state is critical. And then FEMA should be the supporting entity that comes in with when those resources have already been tasked what else do you need that FEMA can step into? Because we're just not, the very best first responders. The ones are the local folks that are there in that community that help their neighbors. That's always the most inspiring of an event like this is neighbors helping neighbors and people who respond. Some people lose their homes and they're over here helping people get out of their own home and save their own property, and they're just completely neglecting, their own personal needs. And that's what I think is so incredibly special about America and about, small town America and these rural areas, that we just don't tell that story enough. That we a lot of times turn on the news at night and everything sucks and is depressing and horrible, and then you look at communities like this and like this state, and you believe in the American people again, and it gives you some pride back into the way that this country is and the people that live here.
Kentuckians are tough. We met with the mayor yesterday who lost his father in the flooding, and he was still out the very next day helping other people in need. Just a remarkable sense of spirit, that American grit. So I think generally, the efforts here in Kentucky have been really remarkable.
Yeah, I'm proud of you and these communities. It's been remarkable. Yeah. All right, well, I'll be around for a few minutes, but you guys, if you have anything you didn't get answered, well, yes, ma'am.
Sorry,
Yes,
one question. Sorry, coming from our newsroom, we heard that there was, in Brunswick County today, that there was a helicopter in distress, but thankfully landed safely. Just curious, was that the helicopter that you were on, or you were all?
It was, but it didn't seem like we were in distress. We just landed and switched helicopters, so apparently we had the right pilots that just said, oh, this is normal. We'll just put it down and hop in a different one. So worked out great. Yes, you bet.
Madam Secretary, would you like to take a tour of the operations center
Yes,
before
we
you
will.
depart?
We'll do that. So if you all want to follow along, you're sure more than welcome.
And on your way out, we'll show you the MERS vehicle, some of the emergency vehicles.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Is it? Well,